On this edition of Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by RaceReviewOnline.com, KennyBruce.net, and Covers.com. Defending series champ Martin Truex Jr. made a statement win at Pocono and will look to make it 2 in a row at a track he should have won last August. But Kyle Larson will have something to say about it as he tries for his 4th straight win at MIS and his first win of the season. Complete driver analysis, the latest odds, picks, and more as Prime Sports NASCAR on the Prime Sports Radio Network starts now. All right, it's Thursday, June 7th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. You're listening to Prime Sports NASCAR for Week 15 of the 2018 season. Make sure to visit Covers Experts at experts.covers.com. Take 50% off any purchase. Use promo code PRIME50. That's PRIME50. You can use that for NASCAR, golf, basketball, hockey, you name it. Experts.covers.com. All right, let's bring in CJ Radoon first from rotowire.com. And CJ, Martin Truex Jr. breaks through for a win, so maybe he's going to start getting on a roll. Maybe Kyle Larson's next, but we've talked the last few weeks about the aero package, and will it return at the second Pocono race? Will it maybe return the second Michigan race, Indianapolis? Will it return at all? If it does return, we certainly hope it returns by the time they come back to Michigan, because of what we've seen over the last couple of years. I don't know what changes they made, whether it's the pavement or the car itself, but Michigan used to be a pretty fun place. It's a fun place no more. It's a terrible track. It's a boring racetrack, and hopefully they'll get this aero package figured out when they come here next time.
Yes, there have been some developments there. We're starting to get some positive reviews from some of the team owners, which are ultimately one of the most important parties in getting this to happen. Even Indianapolis Motor Speedway said that they would be willing to do it. They are, as we talked about many times, the last race before the chase cutoff, or playoffs cutoff. So that's a little bit testy. Indianapolis did say that they would like to see some testing done prior to it actually happening if they were to do it there, though. I think it comes down to being able to figure out a place to test it and the timing in order to do so. I think we've got support from NASCAR, support from the fans for sure, and starting to see some support from the team owners, which should make it happen a little bit faster.
Eric Smith joining us, of course, RaceReviewOnline.com. Anything you've heard, Eric? What do you think about the chances?
I think they're looking good. Steve O'Donnell said this past weekend, I believe it was on Fox Sports 1, that he did acknowledge that they're looking at doing it in the near future and did not rule out this year. I've heard the same tracks, and I've also heard they may even try it at Kentucky next month, which is kind of I didn't even have that on the radar. But then from people I've heard from is with the new repave at Kentucky a couple of years ago, and they redid it again, not this past offseason, the offseason before. With it really being a one-group track, why not try it there? It's a mile and a half. It's the only time they visit there. It can't get any worse than what it has been there the last few years. So that might be a race that you might see creep up. They don't know if the development has already been started, but expect something here soon to at least be an announcement on whether they're going to try it there or not. And the reason why Kentucky also makes sense is, as CJ alluded, the testing is when they're done with that race on a Saturday night, they could actually come up to Indy and test on the track there and see what kind of package, because the cars are already going to have the package on it. Just bring it a couple hours north and try it again. So Kentucky is actually on the radar, but Indy and Michigan are the two that sounds almost imminent now. Like it's probably going to happen, and Kentucky's the wild card.
Well, it has to. It's just a no-brainer. They got to get this done, and I'm glad to hear that there's progress since last week's show. Okay, now, last week, CJ, Martin Truex Jr. gets the win. We talked on this show that he was somebody to look out for because he was double the odds of Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, and yet he was trending in the right direction coming into that track. He had performed well at the track before, and even though they had one really bad pit stop, Cole Pern said on the last pit stop opportunity, I'm sure this is what he said, I don't know, I didn't hear the post-race interview. I'm sure he said something like, well, look, you guys screwed me in the pits about an hour ago. I'm not going to let you screw me again. This is a risk we're going to take, but we're staying out, and it worked.
Yeah, it did, and I had a good feeling about him once I saw his practice, and certainly his qualifying times. Everything looked really consistent. I was pretty surprised, actually, that it ended up being a 3-horse race. Usually one of those 3 ends up having an issue, and at the beginning it looked to be Truex with that pit stop. I guess the tire carrier coming around the corner knocked the car a little bit off of the jack, so they couldn't get the rear tire off, and he dropped right deep in the field after winning the opening stage. But he had such a good car and stayed on top of the adjustments he needed to make that he just charged his way back forward, and he was there at the end. And then, like you said, I think they made the right calls for the first time. It wasn't too long ago we were talking about this team and how they couldn't make
That's
a
right.
right call on pit road, and this time they actually did it, and everything came together, so it was a good win for him.
Eric, it's interesting because Truex gets the win, and now he goes to a track that before last year, not much success at all, but last year he was really strong. Matter of fact, he should have won this race last year or at this track last year in August, except for the caution comes out late. Kyle Larson's got the fresher tires. Wins, gets off the restart ahead of Truex and leads the only 2 laps of the race to steal the win from Truex, his 3rd straight. And then you take a look at Kyle Larson, and he's now starting to close races. And not only is he closing races, but he's closing them strong. 2nd behind Truex last week, 2nd in California to who? Truex. So we're talking about Kyle and Harvick all year long. I think we might have a battle between Truex and Larson on Sunday.
I agree. Truex, out of his last 6 starts in Michigan, he's got 4 top 6 finishes. So he's trending the right direction there. He led 62 laps in this race last year, another 57 last year. As you alluded to, he should have won. So he's coming off of a win at Fontana, which a lot of the drivers, for some reason, and I get why they say the track's raced differently, but the stats say otherwise. It seems that the guys that do good at Fontana do well at Michigan. Well, Truex won both stages. He won the race. He led 125 laps at Fontana back in the spring. So the favorites should show Martin Truex Jr. as the favorite for this weekend. And then, like you said, Larson finished 2nd there. He's been so good at Michigan. And one of the team members made a point about Larson for this week that while sometimes you can get in the rut, the bad finishes, you can blame Chevy, you can blame the car, you can blame the team, but Larson knows what a winning car should feel like at Michigan. He's done it 3 times in a row. So when his car rolls off the truck on Friday and they start practicing, he's going to know whether that car instantly is a race winner or not, and then he can make it the adjustments it takes by the time Sunday comes around to know that car, how it should feel to be a race winner. So I agree. I think it's those two. Basically, both of those drivers, they're race to lose this weekend.
Yeah, and CJ, it's hard to not take Kyle or Harvick to win a race, but you go with right now Harvick is 3-1, Kyle's 4-1, Truex is 4-1, and Larson is 6-1. But I feel this is the first race all season that I would actually feel pretty good about just saying, you know what, maybe I'm just going to go ahead and put money on both Truex and Larson. And one of them wins, I'm going to make out on Sunday because, as usual, there's not a lot of other competitors out there. Maybe Brad Keselowski. I know Elliott's finished runner-up there 3 out of 4 races, but he's still not where he used to be. I don't know. Maybe you go Larson, Truex, put a little bit on Keselowski as a 12-1 shot, and that's your play.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even before looking at the odds, I would say Kyle Larson heading into the weekend would be my top choice. Just based on not the fact that he's won the last 3 races here, but just how he's been trending and how strongly he closed last week's race. I think coming now to a track after last week's performance where things have started to go right, he's got speed, he's building up some momentum. Now you're at a track where he's entirely confident. And then Truex with the momentum from week to week, I think those two are you guys without a doubt.
Are you surprised, Eric, that Keselowski is 12-1? And I guess the reason he's 12-1 is because when you've got 4 drivers that range between 3 and 6-1, everybody else's odds have got to go up really, considerably. And that's a benefit for anybody that wants to take drivers like Keselowski or Blaney, who are both 12-1, Logano 14-1. So the Penske team, they're pretty much the next group right after the top 4.
Yeah, I am a little surprised that his odds. But as you said, the good odds you got to give to the big 3 now. You got to throw Truex in with them, and then Larson's stats are what they are there, so they kind of have to fall off elsewhere. He was only 16th and 17th respectively last year, but But prior to that, he had 11 straight top 13 finishes at Michigan. But what seems like with Keselowski, which is always interesting, is that Michigan seems to always be the place he starts wars. If you remember right, the last couple of years, he started the Toyotas have a more advantage than we do, or he kept starting that. Well, this week he tweeted out that Goodyear, Goodyear sent a release out that they're going to bring a new tire this year. Well, Keselowski was one of the 7 drivers that tested a bunch of different tire configurations back a few weeks ago, and he tweeted out, "Please get my name off this release. This was, out of all the tires we tested, this is the one configuration we said not to do, and that's the one you're doing." So here he goes again. It's like he's playing more mind games, and I feel like it affects him a little bit. He did that last year, and he finished 17th. And I believe it was on Race Hub last night, Chad Knaus was saying that it seems like when people get in Keselowski's head or instances like this, he doesn't necessarily drive well. Now, I don't know if Vegas put that much stock into what he said, but they were kind of saying more lines like a Ryan Blaney this week because they kind of have similar cars. Excuse me. Blaney's got speed, and obviously his value is even better odds for a better that maybe go Blaney route. But Keselowski, yeah, he has been strong there, but he's already starting off, before we're even there, a little bit of drama per se.
Yeah, when he finished 17th last year, he did lead half the race. He led 105 laps in August, won the first stage, but wasn't able to close the deal. And even though he didn't finish in the top 15 last year, CJ, he before that, 6 straight top 10s at the track. He's never won there, but that's okay. I mean, I don't think that's going to hold on too much longer. As far as his teammates, Blaney, same thing we were talking about with Larson. Larson was going through issues, not finishing races, incidents in races, but now he's gone through about 3 or 4 where he's closing top 10s and almost winning the last few races. Here for Blaney, the first thing that we talked about last week he needed to do was finish the race, and he did, and he was a pretty good 6th. I mean, look, you're going to go up against the top 4 drivers in the business right now, and he did a really good job early in the race of holding off Kyle and Harvick for the first 20 or 30 laps. So I think Blaney's looking pretty decent going into this race. I'm not so sure he's going to be a winner. I probably lean towards Keselowski, but then again, if there's the mind issues that Eric is talking about, you might also want to take a look at Joey Logano, who is 14-1, 5th at California, and he's had 2 wins here at this track.
He has, and you are absolutely correct in that Ryan Blaney needed to come away from last week with a finished race, and to add on top of that, he did that, and to add on top of that, the good finish is fantastic for him. But Logano really impressed me last week, so that team had issues, just like Truex, and they were down and out. And I think they've had this happen multiple times this year. If they could get rid of the issues, they might be in contention to win another race. But they came back and got a top finish despite practically being out of the race earlier. So that team just continually digs, finds ways to overcome the mistakes, finds ways to overcome the things that hamper them. So I'd actually put Logano a little bit ahead of Blaney just because of that speed. If Logano doesn't have the issues, he's probably up there, maybe not for the win, but he's definitely a contender in the top 5, whereas I see Blaney kind of sitting just on the fringes of that top 5.
Who do you like this week, Eric, between Kyle and Harvick? They're pretty much co-favorites again. Kyle has 1 win here. Harvick has 1 win here. Harvick, kind of like Keselowski, he was doing pretty well going. He had a nice little run going at Michigan until last year. 7 top 5s in 8 races, 5 runner-ups during that span. But didn't lead a lap at the track last year, and also had his most disappointing race of the season at California. So let's keep that in mind. Whereas Kyle Busch was 3rd at California, he was strong in this race last year. He led 40 laps, top 10s in both races, but no top 5s for Kyle Busch in his last 9 races at Michigan, with an average finish of 26th. That's for you, Eric.
Yeah, I would say out of those 2, probably Harvick, just because he does, like you said, he has those 5 runner-ups, and he was 5th in one of the other races. And, of course, last year he had a little bit of his issues there, but they were also still learning the whole Ford camp and learning, because they said they were behind the 8 ball a little bit with the whole transition to Ford last year. Michigan's a high horsepower track. It's a lot aerodynamics and just pure speed. And I don't think they really had that last year. And you look at this year, they've really got it. So I would lean on Harvick just because of his past. Kyle Busch, yeah, he does have speed too, but as you said, he hasn't had a top 5 there since 2013. So I would say right now, as far as terms of overall speed, it's going to be a great battle between those two. But I would lean more on the side of Harvick right now, just because of his past there in Michigan, and he's kind of proven that he's got speed in that car.
CJ, before we let you go, give me a driver that you think might have a shot, a contender, maybe even a long shot, some driver we haven't mentioned yet.
Eric Almirola. He has been on the fringes. He's been around that top 10 pretty consistently. He said after last week's race, a track where he hasn't performed very well, Michigan's another track where he hasn't performed very well, that he was opening his mind into a new way of doing things, new ways of setting up the car, learning from his teammates, and that really paid off for him, and he got a top 10 last week in Pocono. So I think that Almirola is continually improving each and every week. He's definitely a long shot. It would take a lot for him to win, but he's one that's definitely climbing the ladder.
All right, CJ, appreciate it. We'll look out for your report to preview the race over the weekend, and no racing next week for Father's Day. So we'll talk again when we get an opportunity to talk about the road course racing at Sonoma. So that should be a good one.
Always one of my favorites of the year. Always look forward to that one. It's great seeing him out on the road course, and yeah, a week off will be nice for Father's Day.
All right, enjoy it. Thanks a lot, CJ.
Thank you.
All right, that's CJ Radoon. And Eric, let me ask you about Almirola because, yeah, 7th last week, one of his best results of the season. No question, he's having his best year in the series. He's moved into a big time team, and that helps. We know that. But he's got to lead laps if he's going to win races, unless he's going to win a plate race or steal a race because of fuel mileage. You got to lead laps, don't you? I mean, that's the next step. Now, I'm not saying he can't do that, but I don't know. I mean, how do you compare how other drivers, say, 10 years ago, would be in his position with the results he's having and not lead laps compared to this year where we are in the sport where, well, yeah, but Jimmy Johnson doesn't lead laps anymore either, and it's really because nobody lead laps except the top drivers, and that's just the way it is. So is there a comparison that you can look back to, say, 5 or 10 years ago and say, yeah, I've seen drivers race like Almirola before, and then they pick it up, and then I feel confident that he's eventually going to lead laps and he's going to win some races? Or do you think that he can just come out of nowhere, like CJ indicated, is possible this week and maybe even get a win?
I think it's hard to compare this day and age in NASCAR, even to like 5 years ago, just the way stages are run and the way it seems like the cream of the crop. Like, we've got 3 drivers right now that are leaps and bounds better than everybody. Mm-hmm. Where I would say the era, like, you had Jimmy Johnson, he would start off slow and then boom, he'd kick it into gear and he'd win 4 or 5 races in a row. Yep. Or you'd have like a Carl Edwards or Matt Kenseth. They're guys that they may not start off with a bunch of good finishes, but they would just, you knew they would have the capability to do it. Almirola, I'm not quite there yet because he's got 1 career win. He hasn't really proven that he can be a weekly contender to win races. And granted, he hasn't had this opportunity that he has before yet either. But in order to do that, you do have to kind of more consistently run in the top 5. And he's a solid top 10, top 15 guy, but there's not many weeks you see him consistently in the top 5 throughout the whole race. And
sort of like Ryan Blaney.
Right now.
Yeah. I mean, Blaney is much, he's a younger, and, he's moved up to the big boy team, but Blaney's leading laps, and Blaney could have 2 wins right now.
That's a good example. Yeah, see, where Blaney, if Blaney would win on Sunday, it wouldn't be much of a surprise to anyone. I mean, I think he's 3rd or 4th. I haven't looked at the updated list of lap leaders of the whole series. He's up there. So it wouldn't be a shock to see Blaney win, whereas in Almirola, it'd be like, whoa, kind of said, where did he come from? He hasn't really been up here all year. So I think Almirola, and they're kind of, Chad Knaus made an interesting point the other night, was you kind of already at this point of the season kind of circled, you know kind of where you are in the points. You know where you're going to be when it comes to September trying to get in.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got guys like an Almirola, a Chase Elliott, a Ricky Stenhouse Jr., guys like that instead of gambling during stages these days and needing to run up front, they need all the points they can get, because these stage points could come down to make or breaking guys getting in on points. Because let's face it, we only have 6 winners where we stand right now. I can't see us getting 4 new winners in the next 10 races? Because how are we going to make a case in point that Truex, Harvick, and Kyle Busch aren't going to win again the rest of the regular season? So you're going to have a lot of guys get in on points.
Yeah.
Therefore, they may not necessarily be in the position, like Almirola, he's not in a position yet to win. We could see that. His speed isn't quite there. So do you gamble and go for a win, or do you, kind of like we said about Blaney last week, you just need solid top 10?
Sure.
That's going to get the job done. You're in a position right now to make the playoffs, something he hasn't done since he's won with Petty back in 2014. So you're already there. Now you just, almost damage control, per se, and stay there.
Well,
so
it's interesting because Blaney's been going through all the problems, like in his races, and yet he's still ahead of Almirola in the standings.
And that's where the stage points come in. Well, it seems like Blaney always runs really well. He'll qualify well. The first stage, he'll be up there battling for a stage win. The second stage, he's there, and it seems like that second half of the race, it seems like something happens to him. Well, Almirola, it seems like he may not be in contention the first couple stages, and then by the time you look up at the final stage, he's in the top 10, where they need to get more consistent early. And that starts with qualifying better. That means getting your car better off the truck. You need to be more consistent so you can get stage points, because that can make or break you. Look, that Ryan Blaney is a perfect example. Look where he is in the point standings, but look at his finishes.
Mm-hmm.
He's getting all kinds of stage points. So, yeah, Almirola scares me a little bit as far as winning, but I do think he's got enough speed with Ford power to get a top 10.
Well, look, I don't have Ryan Blaney at the top of my futures portfolio for nothing. I kind of compare. See, to me, I look at Blaney the way I look at his teammate Brad Keselowski. They're pretty much in the same year of their Cup Series development stage when Keselowski won his championship. Nobody expected Brad Keselowski to win the championship when he did. I mean, that was only like his third full season in the series. That wasn't expected. I can see the same thing happening with Blaney. He's that talented. Now, we all know who the best drivers are, and that's why he's still a 20-1 shot to win the championship. But there's no doubt in my mind Ryan Blaney is winning 1 or 2 races this year. He's just been too good. He's too talented. He's on too good of a team. And unless a Joey Logano situation like last year happens to him, he's going to win a race or 2. And that's going to give him the confidence. And when you go into the playoffs of this series, you know that you can always get 1 or 2 drivers at Homestead with a chance to win the championship that nobody was expecting.
You're exactly right. And Blaney is, and as you said, the futures, he's an interesting guy. Now that he's got where he was at Pocono last week, I'd be curious what he gets, where he finishes this week. And then I'm going to take the next couple of weeks out of the equation, because you got a road course, you got Daytona. Those are crapshoots.
Yeah.
But let's see where he can get, because, yeah, you're exactly right. The speed is going to be there. And what I like about Blaney is, and what kind of concerns me a little bit about Harvick, Busch, and Truex, we know how good they are, but the problem is that you got to sustain that for a full season. You don't want to peak too early, per se.
Sure.
And I feel like Blaney has got all the room in the world to still keep improving. And we know with Penske it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Look what Keselowski did last year. He kind of did what Blaney's doing this year. He never really was much of a factor, but he picked his spots where they needed to be, and that got him all the way to the championship 8 round. So actually, he made it to the final round, didn't he? I think Keselowski made it to the championship.
Yeah, he
4.
did. He made it to Homestead.
Yeah, because he won it. Yeah, he won at Talladega. So Blaney can do the same thing. He is far from peaked yet. So, he did his first step. He just needed to break the bad luck trend, get a good solid finish in the top 10. Maybe he gets a top 5 finish this week, carry some momentum with him, get closer and closer to victory lane, because I have to think this is not going to be the Penske speed the whole rest of the year. They've got all the resources to develop to get more speed out of these cars. The talent level is clearly there for all three of them. That once the cars come in, those are going to be three valuable plays in the future that can give Harvick, Busch, or Truex some run for the money, because it can't just be those three all year. Somebody else is going to find something, and it seems like the Penske guys have been close. It's kind of like you got your Tier A of Truex, Harvick, and Busch, but Tier B is starting to form, and once that starts forming and these guys start finding speed and the development, watch out, because I think we're in for a really heck of the final third or fourth of the regular season and then through the playoffs, because I think it's going to be a dogfight between all these guys, to be honest.
Especially if Larson comes on and Penske comes on, then absolutely it's going to make it. Cause that's what we want to see. We want to see, because we know where we're at, which is why they're trying to get this aero package installed. So in the meantime, if we can get, say, Penske at their best against Kyle, Harvick, and Truex, we've got something. Now we've got 6 drivers capable of winning a championship, and all on top of their game. I was thinking about the playoff system, and I know there's a lot of people that are trying to, it's still some people, and I know how you feel, and a lot of people are still not completely sold it's the right system. But I was thinking maybe what they should do, here's an idea. How about, especially because I still just don't like the stages. So if you eliminate the stages, and then what you do is I would be perfectly fine with this myself as a fan, is have the drivers that have qualified themselves, say, at the top. Like let's say if you qualify as the top 2 drivers or the top 4 drivers, and those drivers automatically get 2 playoff round buys. Doesn't mean they can't race. It just means they can't be eliminated. And I think I'd rather see that, because that, to me, equates it more to the other sports. Because teams, like, say, in football, hey, they don't have to go to the top teams don't have to go to a wild card round, and then they get home field. So they always give the top teams in the regular season these little edges, and it makes them, especially sometimes they even give them buys. So I would think I would rather see that, and then this way you don't make it that much more difficult for them as well. But I'm not saying necessarily that when you get to Homestead that you just leave it to 4 drivers, though. And what I want to do is make it so maybe you make it a little easier for the top drivers to get to Homestead. And you know what? If you want to go ahead and give them triple buys and make sure the top 2 drivers or the top 4 drivers are automatically going to compete for the championship at Homestead, but then the other, say, 2, 3, or 4 drivers are now going to compete to get into Homestead as well. Now you've got those additional 4 drivers with the top 4 drivers. Now you've got 8 drivers competing for the championship at Homestead.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, because nobody's talked about this yet, but what happens if Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick, who have leaps and bounds stolen the show this year, what if they don't make it to the round of 8 or the championship?
Yeah, what if they wreck
then
at
what are
Talladega?
People gonna say? Yeah, because what are you going to? Because then does that make the regular season basically pointless? What's the point of winning all these races?
Yeah,
because he didn't even make it to the championship for.
Sure.
And because where last year's a little bit different, where Truex just earned a crazy amount of playoff points. Well, by both of these guys being as strong as they are, they're kind of stealing playoff points from each other. So they're not going to have that huge advantage that Truex had, where you basically just show up and you're going to be in the championship 4. You could be a DNF for every race in the playoffs, but you're still going to get the championship 4 because you always can fall back on your playoff points. Well, these guys, I believe, coming into this week, they each have 25, or maybe one has 25, the other one has 24 playoff points. That's where Truex last year, I think he was pushing 30, 40, 50 by the time we got out of July. So. And these guys are stealing playoff points for each other, so there could be a scenario where you may they have a couple of struggling races, a blown engine, gets taken out by somebody else's wreck. They may not make it through, and what does that say about your regular season? That if you've got your 2 most dominant guys, all of a sudden they're not even making it through, what's the incentive for teams to try real hard in the regular season rather than just, hey, I want to make my cars perfect for the playoffs. All I've got to do is just get in.
Well, look
so
at Larson.
The loops. Yeah,
I mean
that
Larson.
dilutes the first 26 races.
Yeah, and I guess the idea that I'm talking about at least offers more drivers a chance to win in the championship. And therefore, I think it does make it a little bit more exciting because now you've got maybe, hey, because look, you kind of do want that Cinderella story to happen. And if you are, say, the 8th team out of the 8, you never know. There's a shot at Homestead because if you've done really well during the playoffs to be one of those 4 teams and you're doing something right, then you're coming into that situation, driving pretty well. So maybe a Clint Boyer or I don't know, you could even throw in a Ryan Blaney or someone like that would have a shot at the championship to go up against the top 3 or 4 drivers that have done it all season long. So I still think that there's tweaking that they can do, and I think they should do. But first things first, I guess, and take care of this aero package situation. And once you do that, then we can take care of the playoffs. Because I'll tell you right now, I don't look ahead 3 or 4 years from now and see the same playoff system. I just don't. I think they're going to change it somehow, whether it's the stages, whether it's the way they're doing the playoffs. But I don't think I see the same thing. Especially now the aero package is going to change everything. And of course, if the aero package comes in, say 80% of the season, now all of a sudden you're going to get more drivers competing and winning races than would normally, and maybe that also changes the way things go for the playoffs. So I guess first things first, let's see how the aero package goes before we decide what to do with the playoffs.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. Because that could, that could change a lot of things. And,
yes.
And when I heard the drivers talking last week after the race, and they hear Kyle and Harvick, who we knew had speed too, say that the game was basically track position and lane selection on restarts. It's like, are we really going to talk? Your car is clearly fast enough. We've seen it, but we're deciding a race off of clean air and restart lanes.
That's right.
That's not racing to me.
No,
that's just hitting a lottery.
Well, that's what we're going to see this week.
Said,
that's what we're going to get this week because Michigan, the outside lane, is far superior. Why do you think Kyle Larson's won 3 straight races there? He's Mr. Outside Lane.
Yep, and that's exactly and that track got repaved a couple years ago, and that's why the action's almost now to like a one-groove track because that's the problem with repaves. And they talked about using this tire dragon and this and that, and it's like that doesn't fully work. The only way, and I've talked to drivers about this, and I even talked to Will Power about this out here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway during one of the practice days for the 500, and I've always asked, why don't you guys practice in an outside lane? Why do you guys all go to the inside? It seems like even we see practice sessions on the Cup side and Xfinity side that it's like, I get you want to practice your lap times and find the best route, but why doesn't NASCAR put a couple cones down on the fast lane and say you can't drive this whole practice session here? Go rubber in a different lane, and then would that work? And they've all said unanimous, oh, yeah, that would definitely work. I'm like, well, why don't you do it? And like, well, because it's dirty track up there, and we're not going to have the grip. I'm like, well, why don't you slow down? And it's like, well, we don't get the data. I'm like, but why don't you build your own lane and have data, and maybe you're the only guy that could race up there. And like I asked Alexander Rossi after the 500, here this guy's passing people 3 wide on the outside of turns, where they say, oh, no, you can't do that. And, like, it clearly proved you can. Why doesn't anybody else go up there?
Yeah.
So it shows that it can, and it goes back to an aero package. And it's just like, that is not racing. Let's get rid of this whole package, and let's do something where you shouldn't get next to a driver and lose all air and spin.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now. It's like, so these cars are designed to run single file, but the minute you run sideways, it loses all downforce. That, to me, is just asinine to think about.
Well, we have to remember, we're talking about a sport that about, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we used to have restarts where the drivers that were in the back were restarting up front.
Yep. They would start on the inside line.
Yes.
Yep. They would all.
So how asinine was that? I remember it was the first year or two that it was still, because they eliminated it about a couple of years after I started to watch the sport. I started to watch the sport, I think it was the late 90s maybe, And because I don't remember exactly when they made the change, but I think it was late 90s I started watching it, and that was one of the first things I asked, because I was sitting there. I went to a couple of races with a guy that was a big diehard fan and was the co-host of the show, and we would go to the Roadhouse Grill, who was our sponsor, so we'd go to the Charlotte track and the Daytona track, and so I would sit there with him and I would ask him questions, and that's one of the first questions I would ask him is, why are they restarting at the front if they're the bad cars? I didn't understand that, and it was like...
Yeah, that was real confusing to people.
So, I mean, that's what you got, though. You got a sport that does confusing things at times it seems so simple and takes them a long time to figure out you can't do that. So I guess it's not a surprise it's taken them this long to get this aero package in. I mean, seriously. The next thing that we're going to hear is that they had this aero package like 3 years ago and didn't try it, because I don't even want to hear any of that stuff.
No, just get it going. At this point, it's like just however you got to do it. And I'm shocked at this point, as we sit here today, that we've seen them tested at Indy. They ran it at Indy as far as the Xfinity Series.
Mm-hmm.
They ran it at Pocono. That they have the development. Why haven't we? I mean, all these teams, Charlotte's in their backyard. Why are they not testing it there?
Yes.
I mean,
Just
throw on some Goodyear. I'm sure can supply some tires.
Mm-hmm.
The cars are already made. You're already there. Why have they not? And maybe they have. Maybe they just haven't said anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the track's in your backyard. You can't hit 3 or 4 of these cars together and just go over there and pound the pavement for 8 hours and see what kind of data you get.
Isn't that the whole point? That's to be the whole point of being in Charlotte, is that you can do these things, and that's what I'd say the last couple of years when we go from off season, is they have 3 months or so. Why aren't? Because I'd ask, well, how do they do the testing? How do they try to figure out how do they get these cars to perform better so we can get more exciting racing? Well, they have to pick their spots of when these guys can come in and test here and test there. And I would say, well, why don't they just get everybody to come in and test at the same time so they're at the track just like you see them at practice every week? What's the problem? Just bring them in for a week or two, and have them all test at the same time so you can figure out how to get this thing going. And obviously, Daytona would come, Atlanta would come, and we'd sit there and we'd go, well, nothing changed.
Yeah. And it's all right. It's like, it's coming. you can't just get a group together and go run. And that's the thing. I get the time and money and resource thing, but it's like these teams, they've all got enough money. They've all got enough resources. You've got a lot of tracks. You don't even have to run on the NASCAR sanctioned track.
No.
There's all kinds of tracks around this great United States of ours that you could find somewhere to go test this out just to see how it's going to run.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, too, with these drivers. And that's why sometimes test sessions, you get invited to go to them, and you go there, and it's like, okay, you guys are all running single file by yourselves. You're not getting any data.
Really?
And they're like, well, we don't want to wreck. It's like, well, how are you supposed to know how you're going to race if you don't run around other cars?
I can't even see. I didn't even want to hear that. See, that's the problem. You hear these things, and it makes no sense. What are you doing? And maybe this is also part of the reason why they've got to scrap this whole sponsorship thing and bring in a salary cap and let everybody, just like every other sport, everybody has the same amount of money, so you don't have these problems. Because these are the type of little problems that you have when everybody's trying to compete against everybody else with a certain budget. And instead, everybody should have the budget go to the company, to NASCAR. NASCAR is the one with the budget. They're the ones that supply it, and it trickles down to the rest of the teams individually, so each team gets the same percentage. And then, of course, you can, just like in all the major sports, the more successful teams, the Hendricks and the Penske, sure, they're going to have a little bit more money to spend than the Wood brothers, but at least at least the competition is going to be much closer financially than it is now, and that's something I also think has to happen. I think that, to me, that's a no-brainer, but that's going to take a while.
Yeah, at this point, it does. That's the biggest. I always say the money's the root of all evil, and that's the biggest thing in NASCAR right now is money and resources, and you give teams a little bit of leeway and they just go overboard, and you got teams that don't have much leeway and they can't keep up with them, and it's the whole thing starts with resources and finances, and it's just one big convoluted web that until they can get some direction, it's just, how is this ever going to change?
Well, I think this is the aero package changes everything, because the aero package comes in And now all of a sudden we have many more drivers winning races, many more drivers passing for leads. And we're getting the type of racing we've been waiting for, and then more and more people are going to start going to the races. They're going to start tuning into the races, and once that starts happening, then everything else starts to trickle down. You could start making all sorts of other changes. I saw Dale Earnhardt Jr. after one of the period breaks in hockey in Washington, getting ready for the NBC coverage. So I'm sure that knowing the NASCAR fans, they're pretty excited about that. And who is going to be his on-air partners? Is it going to be the same guys from last year, except Dale steps into the booth?
Yeah, basically Dale is going to have – he's kind of going to be a floater role. Because he's kind of made it clear that he's an employee of NBC, basically. So, like, they sent him to the Winter Olympics, and he was at the hockey game, and he's going to be kind of, that pre-race desk they have of, like, Kyle Petty sometimes does it, and they have a couple of analysts there. I think he's going to be on that. They may have him in the booth some. They may have him kind of like a Larry McReynolds role on Fox, where they go to him and he breaks things down. I think that's kind of going to be Dale's role. They're still going to have Steve Letarte and Jeff Burton and Rick Allen, the play-by-play. But I do think they're going to – I mean, let's be honest. I'm going to assume Jeff Burton's going to be the odd man out here in the next year or two, because Steve Letarte was Junior's crew chief the last few years. So those two are going to work well with each other in the booth. So, and Junior, let's face it, people know his name.
Oh, yeah.
People need to tune in to listen to him.
Sure.
So he might be a guy you want in the booth full time.
Yeah, no.
But that could boil down to he's got a daughter now. Does he even want to be on the road for 18 weeks at the end of the season when he can pick and choose what races he goes to? So I think that's what's going to come down to. But if he wants to be in the booth, NBC will find a way to have him in the booth full time.
And by the way, if there is a top 10 or a top 20 of changes to be made at NASCAR, that's one of them. Pick one network like everybody else and have one broadcast team like everybody. Now, look, I don't mind if you want to have Xfinity Series on NBC or something like that, but pick one network and that's it, okay? And make sure it's the top network with the top guys, which is Fox, and keep them and make sure. And if you want to bring Dale Jr. with those guys, that's fine. But that's another thing that they have to do because, look, nobody likes the NBC broadcast team. It's now sometimes I think some of the graphics that they've done at times have been good. I think they've been better sometimes than Fox, but those are different people. But the broadcast team itself, it's wanting. There's nothing there. I mean, you just don't even notice them, to tell you the truth. And also, I forget which race it is every year, but we don't really need to bring the Jarretts back again. That
was the Darlington, the Southern. Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, no more bringing the Jarretts back for 100 laps or something like that, because it's. I mean, by the time they're done, I think we're already in REM sleep, and it's already too late, and we wake up like 3 hours after the race. And see, you screwed it up for me. Before I let you go, we know pretty much by the way the year has gone and the way this race history has gone, we're going to see the top drivers this week. Throw in potentially Penske too. But I asked CJ, he told me Almirola. I've mentioned Elliott because he's got the 3 runner-ups in 4 races, which is nice. But I don't know. I mean, he is 20-1, so that's not bad for a driver that's got 3 runner-ups in 4 races. Eric Jones was 3rd in one of the races last year. He's 22-1. Denny Hamlin is 16-1. He's got a couple of wins there. Anybody else that you think is a serious contender?
Yeah, I've got a few. Paul Menard again. I know I said him last week. He's one I'd watch because, again, Penske Alliance.
Okay.
Ryan Blaney finished 4th in that car in 2016 there. And Michigan, surprisingly enough, I did some research on Paul Menard, and it's his best track.
Yep.
If you look from 2012 to 2015, again, we're not talking about peak Paul Menard years. He had 7 straight top 12 finishes there. He's fantastic there in the Xfinity Series, which he's running again this weekend for Penske in the Xfinity Series at Michigan. He actually won an Xfinity Series race there a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So he's a good long shot play. Again, you could package him in there. Chase Elliott. And Chase Elliott, I looked at, he's only had 1 finish, I believe, past 13th since we're talking all the way back in late March. So his stats are improving.
Yeah.
Jimmy Johnson's one that for the odds that he's been given, Chad Knaus pointed out through the first 7 races, Jimmy Johnson's average finish was just over 21st. These past 7 races, his average finish is like 7th and some change.
Mm-hmm.
He finally led some laps last week, and Jamie McMurray alluded to on the Xfinity Series broadcast that Chevrolet was given and granted an engine upgrade that either was supposed to come for Pocono or Michigan.
Okay.
So I would sense it maybe came at Pocono, hence what you saw with Kyle Larson, Jimmy Johnson finally leading some laps, that what can they do now with maybe a little more powerful engine for their new car? So given his odds, given his past stats at Michigan, I know he hasn't had great stats recently, but in the past he used to be really, really good there. If you want to give me some favorable odds for him, he's worth a look this week.
He's 40 to 1.
The main guy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
40 to 1.
Yeah, so why not? I mean, he's one that you never know. He's trending in the right direction. But a guy that I've got my eye on is Jamie McMurray. We know Kyle Larson's stats, his teammates there. I mean, he's won there 3 straight years. McMurray's got to have the same resources, equipment, notes, everything to go by. And you look at his last 6 starts at Michigan, 5 of them resulted in the top 10, including 5th in this race last year. So he's a guy to watch just because of what Ganassi's had. Plus, you've also, as weird as this sounds, have to factor in Chevy's really going to be going for this race a lot because they wrecked the pace car in Belle Isle last week in the IndyCar race, and it was the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix. So Chevy sponsored it. It was in Detroit. It's in Chevrolet's backyard.
Uh-huh.
It's the brand-new 2019 Chevrolet Corvette.
Okay.
And pulling out of the pits, they wrecked the pace car head-on into the wall.
Beautiful.
So a little bit embarrassment, and it was actually the head of General Motors for the motorsports division who actually wrecked the pace car.
How do you wreck the pace car?
Yeah, literally, I don't know if you've seen the video yet,
No.
but it's on YouTube. He literally pulled out of the pits in a brand-new Chevrolet Corvette, the 2019 version, and he spun it and went head-on into a concrete barrier.
He spun
in the
it.
pace car before
Okay.
the race even started.
And who was driving?
They had a red flag before the race started.
Who was driving?
His name, I forget exactly what his name is, but he is the head of the General Motors division for motorsports.
Was it an old
So
guy?
he makes the,
Was it an older guy?
I would say he's in his probably 40s or 50s, so
Oh,
he's not
not
too
that old.
terribly old.
No. Okay.
No,
Hmm.
and he's driven pace cars in the past, and the PR statement was kind of funny. They put out there, well, due to weather conditions and the track, it was sunny and in the 70s.
Nice.
There was
try.
no weather or track conditions. He just flat out lost it,
Nice
and
try.
he went head on into the wall. So they had some kind of PR blunders this week with wrecking the pace car. Now they're back in a NASCAR race in their own backyard. I'm pretty sure they want to maybe end a little bit better. So if they got that engine upgrade, it's going to be even more powerful this week. So Kyle Larson, Jamie McMurray, that Jimmy Johnson, Chase Elliott, watch out for those guys.
All right. Because Chevy has no wins this year, right?
They won the Daytona 500 with Austin Dillon, but they haven't won since.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
They've only got one stage win, too, the whole year. So
That's terrible.
well, this is a good barometer to see where they stand because Michigan, being the manufacturer at Ford and Chevy's backyard, they really bring their best up because they got a lot of executives there. So they don't want to leave them disappointed. So this is a weekend that you really can get a good barometer of who stands where.
All right, sounds good. Good info as always, Eric. Appreciate it. We'll look out for more race coverage at racereviewonline.com for this weekend's race at Michigan, the Firekeepers Casino 400. And then we'll talk to you again before Sonoma. Not sure when. I'm going to try to touch base with Kenny. We got a week off, so maybe do another show at some point. But definitely we'll be on the air before Sonoma. So enjoy the race. Hopefully we have a good race. I doubt it. It's Michigan. We don't have the aero package yet, but it is what it is. Hopefully we'll get something to look forward to, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Awesome. Sounds good. Talk to you then.
All right. That's Eric Smith, racereviewonline.com, and you can check him out on Twitter at Eric_racereview. You can also check out CJ Radoon at CJ Radoon and at Kenny Bruce. And again, Kenny will be on the program. I'm trying to see if I can get him on next week. We have an off week, so it's a good time to get him on and kind of have a feel for what's happening and maybe go over the futures. That's not a bad idea. We don't really tap into that too much, but we'll try to do that next week. We'll see if I can get that done with Kenny. Or maybe I'll have him on the week before Sonoma. So, but I'll get him on soon, and we'll talk again with Eric and CJ real soon. That'll wrap it up. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. Our next broadcast here on the network is Friday for our Prime Sports Horse Report Belmont Stakes preview as Justify goes for the Triple Crown. For CJ Radoon, for Eric Smith, and Greg DePalma, we'll see you next time on Prime Sports NASCAR.